Love in the Time of Cholera. Why it's a bad title. I admit that Love in the Time of is a great title, up to a point. You're reading along, you're happy, it's about love. I like the way the word time comes in, a nice feeling. Then the morbid cholera appears. I was happy till then. Why not Love in the Time of the bluebirds? Love in the Time of Oozing Sores and Pustules is probably an earlier title the author used as he was writing in a rat-infested treehouse on an old Smith Corona. This writer, whoever he is, could have used a couple of weeks in Pacific Daylight Time. If you saw her in these moments, you might think she was collecting her thoughts in order to go forward. But I see it another way. Her mind is being overwhelmed by two processes that must simultaneously proceed at full steam. One is to deal with and live in the present world. The other is to re-experience and mourn something that happened long ago. It is as though her lightness pulls her toward heaven, but the extra gravity around her keeps her earthbound. But carols were more convoluted, and they struck me as funny in a new way. 1. Babies are illogical. 2. Nobody is despised who can manage a crocodile. 3. Illogical persons are despised. Therefore, babies cannot manage crocodiles. And 1. No interesting poems are unpopular among people of real taste. 2. No modern poetry is free from affectation. 3. All of your poems are on the subject of soap bubbles. 4. No affected poetry is popular among people of taste. 5. Only a modern poem would be on the subject of soap bubbles. Therefore, all your poems are uninteresting. As she sits in a booth, it never occurs to her to observe herself, and thus she is spared the image of a girl sitting alone in a bar on Saturday night. A girl who is willing to give every ounce of herself to someone, who could never betray her lover, who never suspects maliciousness of anyone, and whose sexuality sleeps within her, waiting to be stirred. She keeps working to make connections, but the pile of near misses is starting to overwhelm her. What Mirabelle needs is some omniscient voice to illuminate and spotlight her, and to inform everyone that this one has value, this one over here, the one sitting in the bar by herself, and then to find her counterpart and bring him to her. What if there were no punchlines? What if there were no indicators? What if I created tension and never released it? What if I headed for a climax, but all I delivered was an anti-climax? What would the audience do with all the tension? Theoretically, it would have to come out sometime. But if I kept denying them the formality of a punchline, the audience would eventually pick their own place to laugh, essentially out of desperation. This type of laugh seemed stronger to me, as they would be laughing at something they chose, rather than being told exactly when to laugh.
People in coats and ties were milling around the Tally Gallery, and on the wall were the minimally rendered still lifes by Giorgio Morandi, most of them no bigger than a tea tray. Their thin browns, ashy grays, and muted blues made people speak softly to one another, as if a shouted word might curdle one of the paintings and ruin it. Bottles, carafes, and ceramic whatnots sat in his paintings like small animals huddling for warmth, and these shy pictures could easily hang next to a Picasso or Matisse without feeling inferior. I could dream it forever and still not do it, but when the time comes for it to be done, God, I want to be ready for it, to be ready for the moment of convergence between the thing done and the doing of it, between the thing to be made and its maker. At that moment, I am speaking for everyone, I am dreaming for the billions yet to come, I am taking part of us that cannot be understood by God, and letting it bleed from the wrist onto the canvas. And it can only be made, because I have felt these things, my lust, my greed, my hatred, my happiness. What if there were no punchlines? What if there were no indicators? What if I created tension and never released it? What if I headed for a climax, but all I delivered was an anti-climax? What would the audience do with all the tension? Theoretically, it would have to come out sometime. But if I kept denying them the formality of a punchline, the audience would eventually pick their own place to laugh, essentially out of desperation. This type of laugh seemed stronger to me, as they would be laughing at something they chose, rather than being told exactly when to laugh.
Be gentle and peaceful each day. Be warm and human and grateful, and have a good thing to say. Be thoughtful and trustful and childlike, be witty and happy and wise. Be honest and love all your neighbors, be obsequious, purple, and clairvoyant. Be pompous, obese, and eat cactus. Be dull and boring and omnipresent. Criticize things you don't know about. Be oblong and have your knees removed. Be sure to stop at stop signs, and drive 55 miles an hour. Pick up hitchhikers foaming at the mouth, and when you get home get a master's degree in geology. Be tasteless, rude, and offensive. Live in a swamp and be three-dimensional. Put a live chicken in your underwear. Go into a closet and suck eggs.
Scientists at first were skeptical that a kitten-type being could exist in the rare Martian atmosphere. As a test, 2 Earth kittens were put in a chamber that simulated the Martian air. The diary of this experiment is fascinating. 6 a.m., kittens appear to sleep. 7:02 a.m., kitten wakes, darts from one end of cage to another for no apparent reason. 7:14 a.m., kitten runs up wall of cage, leaps onto other kitten for no apparent reason. 7:22 a.m., kitten lies on back and punches other kitten for no apparent reason. 7:30 a.m., kitten leaps, stops, darts left, abruptly stops, climbs wall, clings for 2 seconds, falls on head, darts right for no apparent reason. 7:51 a.m., kitten parses first sentence of daily newspaper that is at bottom of chamber. With the exception of the parsing, all behavior is typical of Earth kitten behavior. The parsing activity, which was done with a small ballpoint pen, was an anomaly. Both view and paintings are layered. First, ephemera and notations on the back of the canvas. Labels indicate gallery shows, museum shows, footprints in the snow, so to speak. Then pencil scribbles on the stretcher, usually by the artist, usually a title or a date. Next the stretcher itself. Pine or something. Wooden triangles in the corners so the picture can be tapped tighter when the canvas becomes loose. Nails in the wood securing the picture to the stretcher. Next, a canvas, linen, muslin, sometimes a panel, then the gesso, a primary coat, always white. A layer of underpaint, usually a pastel color, then, the miracle, where the secrets are, the paint itself, swished around, roughly, gently, layer on layer, thick or thin, not more than 1/4 of an inch ever. God can happen in that 1/4 of an inch, the occasional brush hair left embedded, colors mixed over each other, tones showing through, sometimes the weave of the linen revealing itself. The signature on top of the entire goulash. Then varnish is swabbed over the whole. Finally, the frame, translucent gilt or carved wood. The whole thing is done. My father muttered something to me, and I responded with a mumbled "What?" He shouted, "You heard me," thundered up from his chair, pulled his belt out of its loops, and inflicted a beating that seemed never to end. I curled my arms around my body as he stood over me like a titan and delivered the blows. This was the only incident of its kind in our family. My father was never physically abusive toward my mother or sister and he was never again physically extreme with me. However, this beating and his worsening tendency to rage as directed at my mother, which I heard in fright through the thin walls of our home, made me resolve, with icy determination, that only the most formal relationship would exist between my father and me, and for perhaps 30 years, neither he nor I did anything to repair the rift. The rest of my childhood, we hardly spoke. There was little he said to me that was not critical, and there was little I said back that was not terse or mumbled. When I graduated from high school, he offered to buy me a tuxedo. I refused because I had learned from him to reject all aid and assistance. He detested extravagance and pleaded with us not to give him gifts. I felt, through a convoluted logic, that in my refusal, I was being a good son. I wish now that I had let him buy me a tuxedo, that I had let him be a dad. Having cut myself off from him, and by association the rest of the family, I was incurring psychological debts that would come due years later in the guise of romantic misconnections and a wrong-headed quest for solitude. I have heard it said that a complicated childhood can lead to a life in the arts. I tell you this story of my father and me to let you know I am qualified to be a comedian. The public has a short memory. That's why all these big stars do these crazy, terrible things and 2 years later they're back in the biz, you know. 'Cause the public has a short memory. Let me give you a little test, okay? This is my thesis. The public has a short memory and, like how many people remember, a couple of years ago, when the Earth blew up? How many people? See? So few people remember. And you would think that something like that, people would remember. But no. You don't remember that? The Earth blew up and was completely destroyed? And we escaped to this planet on the giant space ark? Where have you people been? And the government decided not to tell the stupider people cause they thought that it might affect dawning realization. Looks around. Oh. Okay. Let's move on. Had his room been facing west he would have noted the sparkling 25-mile vista to the sea which looks almost like the Mediterranean. He would have noted how the streets of LA undulate over short hills as though a finger is poking the landscape from underneath. How laid over this crosshatch are streets meandering on the diagonal creating a multitude of ways to get from one place to another by traveling along the hypotenuse. These are the avenues of the tryst which enable acting student A to travel the 18 miles across town to acting student B's garage apartment in 9 minutes flat after a hot-blooded phone call at midnight. Had he been facing seaward on a balcony overlooking the city the writer might have heard drifting out of a tiny apartment window the optimistic voice of a shower singer imbued with the conviction that this is a place where it is possible to be happy. In logic class, I opened my textbook, the last place I was expecting to find comic inspiration, and was startled to find that Lewis Carroll, the supremely witty author of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, was also a logician. He wrote logic textbooks and included argument forms based on the syllogism, normally presented in logic books this way: all men are mortal. Socrates is a man. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. But Carroll's were more convoluted, and they struck me as funny in a new way. 1. Babies are illogical. 2. Nobody is despised who can manage a crocodile. 3. Illogical persons are despised. Therefore, babies cannot manage crocodiles. And, 1. No interesting poems are unpopular among people of real taste. 2. No modern poetry is free from affectation. 3. All your poems are on the subject of soap bubbles. 4. No affected poetry is popular among people of taste. 5. Only a modern poem would be on the subject of soap bubbles. Therefore, all your poems are uninteresting. Be courteous, kind, and forgiving. Be gentle and peaceful each day. Be warm and human and grateful. Be thoughtful and trustful and childlike, be witty and happy and wise. Be honest and love all your neighbors. Be obsequious, purple, and clairvoyant. Be pompous, obese, and eat cactus. Be dull and boring and omnipresent. Criticize things that you don't know about. Be oblong and have your knees removed. Be sure to stop at stop signs. And drive 55 miles an hour. Pick up a hitchhiker foaming at the mouth. And when you get home get a master's degree in geology. Be tasteless, rude, and offensive. Live in a swamp and be three-dimensional. Put a live chicken in your underwear. Go into a closet and suck eggs. Now, everyone, repeat. Added ladies only, never make love to Bigfoot. Men only, hello, my name is Bigfoot. Bohemians. These Bohemians, Mr. and Mrs. Clarence Williams, and their 7 children, Biff, Tina, Sparky, Louise, Tuffy, Mickey, and Biff No. 2, lived in a notorious artists' colony and planned community. Naturally, the Bohemians' existence thrived on creativity. Early in the morning, Mrs. Williams would rise and create breakfast. Then, Mr. Williams, inspired by his wife's limitless energy, would rush off to a special room and create tiny hairs in a sink. The children would create things, too. But being temperamental artists, they would often flush them away without a second thought. But the Bohemians' creativity didn't stop there. Mr. Williams would then rush off downtown and create reams and reams of papers with numbers on them and send them out to other Bohemians who would create special checks to send to him with figures like $7.27 written on them. At home, the children would be creating unusual music, using only their voices to combine an avant-garde, 8-tonal melodies. Yes, these were the Bohemians. A seething hotbed of rebellion, the artists, the creators of all things that lied between good and bad. I was alone with him in the bedroom. His mind was alert but his body was failing. He said, almost buoyantly, "I'm ready now." I sat on the edge of the bed, and another silence fell over us. Then he said, "I wish I could cry, I wish I could cry." At first I took this as a comment on his condition, but am forever thankful that I pushed on. "What do you want to cry about?" I said. "For all the love I received and couldn't return." I felt a chill of familiarity. There was another lengthy silence as we looked into each other's eyes. At last he said, "You did everything I wanted to do." "I did it for you," I said. Then we wept for the lost years. I was glad I didn't say the more complicated truth, "I did it because of you." Which quotes did you like the most?
For more such quotes, subscribe our channel. Like, comment. See you in the next video.